My name is Kerwin Wimberly, and I am the director of the Green Task Force. And this is Councilman Scott Benson. He is the chairperson of the Green Task Force. We want to do introductions to start off. Thank you so much.
Natalie Jacob from Green Living Science and chair of the Recycling and Waste Reduction Subcommittee.
Elizabeth Garver, Michigan Department of Environmental Quality.
Passion Murray, Detroit Dirt.
Margaret Weber, convener of Zero Waste Detroit.
Kathleen Klein, Community Relations for Waste Management.
I'm Rachel Clegan with Green Living Science and the Recycling and Waste Reduction Subcommittee.
Hi, I'm Donna Reyes. I'm an urban designer for Manick and Smith Group.
Hi, I'm Peter Benz, and I'm the Vice Chairman of the Friends of the Detroit River, and I'm also a member of the Blue-Green Subcommittee.
Ed Tatum, engineer for WSP.
I'm Richard Ackerman with the Eastside Community Network.
Malik Johnson, City of Detroit, Building Safety, Engineering, and Environmental Department.
Alana Unger, Hazon Detroit, Jewish environmental nonprofit.
Good afternoon, my name is Alex Hurley, and I represent U.S. Ecology.
Hello, Raymond Landsberg with U.S. Ecology as well.
Laura Tremore Spears from Wayne State University Healthy Urban Waters Program and Transformative Research in Urban Sustainability Training.
Irma Leapart, Sierra Club, and co-chair of the Water Subcommittee of the Green Task Force, which was formerly the Blue-Green Infrastructure Subcommittee.
Good afternoon, I'm Khalil Lagan with the Alliance for the Great Lakes, also co-chair of the Water Subcommittee and the Resilience and Master Planning Committee for the Green Task Force.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Galen Hardy of Zero Waste Detroit.
Al Jordan with Green for Life Environmental.
Tony Henry with Zachary & Associates and Detroit Collaborative Design Center.
Taylor Mitchell, high school intern with the Sahara Club.
Kendall Kuhneman, City of Detroit, General Services Department and Sustainability Office.
Shannon Haupt, I'm with EcoWorks.
Good afternoon, I'm Kathleen Francois, Executive Director of GreeningDetroit.com, and I take the minutes for the Green Task Force.
Arnisha Jennings, Detroit Dirt.
So this is something new for us, and so this is the first time the Green Task Force is being televised, so hence the microphones. And in the future, if we do this again, we'll do some wireless mics, so we don't have to, everybody doesn't have to get up and it's not so interactive. But we really wanted to bring to you a special presentation today and something we hadn't talked about at a higher level until now. So Passion Murray from Detroit Dirt is here today to talk about what's going on and what we're doing around on a more manufacturing level on a much larger scale when it comes to composting. This is something we've been talking about. We actually talk about this in our subcommittees, and so really wanted to bring this on as someone who's looking to do this at the commercial level and a commercial scale. And so, Ms. Murray, if you're ready.
My name is Passion Murray, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about Detroit Dirt and the journey, and just to give you a quick, background as to who I am a little bit into my life. I grew up on the west side of the state in Grand Rapids, and I used to take trips to the landfills with my dad as a child. He had a small contracting business in Grand Rapids, and that's really where it all began. I had no idea this is really a spiritual journey. I had no idea that I would be creating solutions around organics and waste diversion. But I grew up going to the landfills with my dad. He had contracts for snow plowing, waste removal, industrial mowing. And our family had a farm in Mississippi as well, so I had the opportunity to witness my grandfather being one with nature. And so that has a lot to do with who I am as well. Because the thing is, when you are exposed as a young child to a farm or you grow up going to a farm, it really truly does impact your life in a different way than those who may not be as connected. So my appreciation for farming, that's how the world revolves to me. Everything is around the soil and farming. And so when I went away to undergrad in Texas and came back around 2003 to Grand Rapids, I moved back. Grand Rapids was investing hundreds of millions of dollars into building their city more efficiently. So I had an opportunity to be involved in some green building projects, LEED standard buildings. I'm sure I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know about LEED, but if you traditionally go to landfills growing up or grew up around them, And you speed up to the future, and contractors and general contractors and construction managers, they have a different approach when it comes to sustainability. I grew up taking waste to the landfill in retrospect, but when I, began to really understand the future of sustainability with regards to waste, it really came down to putting a dollar value on those resources. They were no longer looked at as waste to me anymore. And that was fascinating for me because the landfill didn't make sense as a child anyway. So as I became an adult and the more sustainability became a buzzword and people are talking about waste streams, that was like a dream come true as a young child. You see things in one way, and then as you get older, you want to help or be involved in your family business, but you have an opportunity to make a difference. When I moved to Detroit in 2005, I was here a little bit before the bankruptcy happened and whatnot, and a few years before. And I think somebody said they were from the Sierra Club. So the Sierra Club, National Wildlife Federation, and others were sponsoring some of us to go to Washington, D.C. That was like 2008, 2009. And Al Gore's Repower America at that time was really picking up momentum. And the focus was really of getting people from all over the country to come into Washington, D.C. and to lobby for resilient movements regarding climate change. And at that time, what was most fascinating for me was the idea of having all of these people in one room discuss renewables, waste, recycling. I mean, you name it, there were companies and experts from all over the country. Well, that was really the segue for me, or the introduction to come back into the city and take a different approach with regards to waste. And the urban farming movement, I started interviewing people who were, gardening and creating urban farms. And so Greg Willewer from Brother Nature and I, we started hanging out, and over the course of the year, he was already talking to the Detroit Zoological Society about utilizing their herbivore manure. The Carbon Revolution is a campaign that I'm pushing around the country. And the reason why I'm pushing this carbon revolution is, obviously when you bury food waste, that gas or those greenhouse gases escape and go into the atmosphere, the biosphere, and it causes problems. And what I think we need to start thinking about is, there are studies that have shown that in the microbial community, which is what's in the ground, the worms, the mites, everything living in the ground, we're dealing with soil and contamination issues all over the world. We know that we're dealing with a brownfield right here. A lot of the city is a brownfield. And so I don't consider myself an urban farmer. I never have. My agenda was making sure that I could bring people together to push a low carbon economy. And that's what this presentation is really going to be about. Composting in one regard, but also the importance of why we should be composting. And I think what's happening is, they talk about animals being extinct, but we need to be talking about the microbial community and how we need to help the microbial community. I mean, that's really where it is. According to the UN and studies around the world, if there's only 60 years of soils left, 60 years of harvest, that means that your children and their children, your grandchildren, are in trouble. So it's our job today to start creating pathways in which we can start adding on to that 60 years, 61, 62, 63. And that's what the carbon revolution is. So let's go, Arnisha, let's see. Let's watch this video really quick, and then I'll go back into the presentation.
We all want to find a common ground with the people, a shared experience, a community. But how often do we consider the bigger picture, the circle that we're connected to? Like, who made our food? What soil was it grown in? And where does our food go when it gets thrown away? Each year, 62 million tons of food waste is sent to landfills. What if we used our food waste for a greater purpose? By composting our food and animal waste, we can have a direct hand in where our next meal comes from, in growing our cities, and being an active part of the circle we all belong to. We're all connected to the soil. We're all connected because of the soil. Detroit Dirt, from the ground up.
The whole purpose of Detroit Dirt, when I first started this, yes, we wanted to be an engine for urban farming, to get the urban farming community resources. But, you know, in the beginning, when I had the co-founder and I started this, we wanted to create a socially and environmental and economic model, right? So socially, environmental, and economical. I call it C. The foundation of the earth is the soil. If an urban farming movement is looking to be a viable movement in any city, I think that the resources that you know, you have within that local economy are important to push the movement. And so what I noticed is a lot of the urban farmers, and all of them are doing an exceptional job. They're doing awesome, and I think that they are bringing a positive light into the city. But I think what happens is when you have resources such as yard waste, food waste, you got a great zoo right down the road that has, you know, herbivore manure, we have to figure out how to process those materials and get those resources to the people who need them. What brought me to the carbon revolution, or, you know, that C stands for a lot of things. It stands for composting as well, but we're carbon, you know what I mean? We have everything that's in the ground in our bodies. You know, when people talk about gut bacteria and things like that, there's bacteria in the soils as well. And so the connection for me, you know, or the awakening moment was, what could I do to bring people together who are urban farmers, gardeners, composters, whomever, soil experts? We all have this intersection of understanding that how important the soil and the water is. I mean, that's a marriage, you know. If the oceans are dealing with contaminants and corrosiveness and things of that nature, and the soils are dealing with the same problems as far as contaminants, then we have to redirect. And so in America, we waste $218 billion of food waste. That blows my mind every time I see that figure, whether it's food sitting in a warehouse, whether it's being buried in the landfill, whether it's restaurant waste, whatever, $218 billion, that's a problem, but the solution is there, because all we need to do is start looking at that 25 to 30% of the landfill and redirect that food waste. There's no way we should be burying food waste, which is contributing to, you know, greenhouse gases. That just doesn't make any sense. In this journey, I have discovered a multitude of things, but here's a few things that I want to share with you. So when I was picking up the food waste, I'm just going to explain this model real quick. We would pick up food waste from General Motors and Blue Cross and others in the community, right? You got everything from spent grain to coffee grounds, and I told you I have a relationship with the Detroit Zoological Society. So where it all began was there was a pilot. The pilot we ran with the Chevy Volt plant back in 2012, somewhere up in there, 2011. And the purpose was for me to collect data with General Motors and see how much food waste that they were actually wasting at that plant. So after about a year, I convinced the zoo and I convinced General Motors to give me a chance or open up an opportunity. They didn't give me anything. To open up that door so I could create a model around food waste. And what happened was, as the data was being collected, you know, I started thinking about audits for the city, you know, around food waste. A lot of things were, I couldn't even really sleep most nights because there was so much going on in my head. But anyways, as I was creating this closed loop model, I told the Detroit Zoological Society, in which I said Greg was already talking to them and he wanted to utilize the herbivore manure. But what I saw was the food waste was a problem. Urban farmers needed resources. So if you're helping to build a local economy, I'm like, the resources were right there. So if we were going to make compost, how do we make it, mass produce the compost? So what happened was I had to create a contract because it wasn't being done. So that for me was a plus. That was, to me, a very positive thing because General Motors said, okay, let's figure out how are we going to do this? And so we had to find some land, which the Canadian Rail and Detroit Tunnel, they have a partnership, and they had a lot of land along the rail line. And so what I wanted to do was, it wasn't really about money in the beginning at all because I didn't make any money. This was really about creating a lab in which I could send the food waste to this property and start playing around with different ratios. And so when you're composting manually, you understand that there are carbon and nitrogen ratios. I mean, that's what it really breaks down to. And that's, once again, connecting back to this carbon revolution. So my goal was, after a couple of years of running this pilot, sending all of these resources to this site, was to prove that as a city, we could be a leader in this industry. If California, places like LA, New York, Chicago, they don't have the land mass that we have. So in my mind, I was like, okay, if I can create a nice compost, and get it back into the community, because I did that, for free in the beginning. So we made the compost, processed it. It took about a 10-month to a year process when you're doing it manually. When you don't have the technology like in-vessel or compost turners and all of the other, technology that's out there, when you're literally doing this, manually with a few machines and front-end loaders, it takes about a year for those pathogens, to remove the pathogens, to make sure that your temperatures are where they need to be. And so that's really where it all began. For me, the journey began on that 2.5-acre plot of land, taking food waste from Blue Cross Blue Shield, General Motors, and processing it with the herbivore manure from the Detroit Zoological Society. Because I wanted to keep that volume, at a point where I could manage it properly. So, the first few years, that's what I focused in on, was making sure we created a compost that, was great for the soil. And so when I really started thinking about the bigger picture here, it was like, okay, this is a city that once built cars. There's technology out here in the world, such as in-vessel, anaerobic digesters, biodigesters. If we can build cars in this city, then surely we could build the technology that we need in order to create mass volumes of compost. The same ingenuity and inventiveness and brilliant people who already live in this city, we just need to figure out how to build industry. And so when you look at a waste contract, typically there's tipping fees, and then they take that waste and then send it off to the landfill. Well, if the city has residents, which they do, tons of them, and they're creating yard waste, then we should be keeping that yard waste right here in the city and processing it. Same thing with the herbivore manure from the zoo and all the restaurants and buildings and everything, all the food waste that's here in the city. So when you talk about a market, now on here it talks about the social, economic, and environmental goals, employment opportunity, wasted food, the loss embedded energy in that, and the long-term decrease of the GHG emissions. So if I'm speaking about industry, right? So if we begin to mass produce compost here, we're gonna create jobs. We're building the technology or the equipment to do that. We're creating jobs. We did a trial run with our 5-pound and 25-pound compost. We packaged it with Michigan Works, which is a local recycling company, and they make boxes. So we utilize Michigan Works, the Goodwill Green Works, They take folks who come out of the prison systems and, we look at that as recycling lives. So if we could take that workforce and marry that with this industry, then you have a solution right there. Then you look at what you're actually producing. Now, when it comes to compost, there are worm castings. There are different ratios that you can make. You could 80% food waste, 10%, manure. However you do those ratios, that's the market. Those are market indicators right there. That's a billion-dollar industry. When you walk into Home Depot or, a local nursery, you see 50 different products on the shelf. Well, why isn't Detroit creating its own compost and putting it on the market? Or why isn't Detroit building the technology that we need to do this? Well, I thought, let me create a model, and then maybe others will join forces and collaborate, because I can't be the only one to do this. There's a McDonald's, a Burger King, a Wendy's. There's a competition in industry. It's the same thing with anything. So, I get questions from people all over the country. Well, what if we came there? What if, please, this is a bigger issue. This isn't just about Detroit Dirt being a leading model with regards to organics diversion. This is about creating a market and an industry in the city that needs this to happen. And furthermore, the world. If the UN is taking the time to research and develop, and they really broke down, our life, actually the lifespan of the soil with 60 years of harvest left, we got a lot of work to do around the world. And this is the one thing that can bring us together: soil and water. Mother Nature doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter how much money you have, what community you live in, we're all affected by water and soil. And so if we're looking at 60 years, we should be having a system in every corner of the city. If we're looking at 60 years of soil and we're going to bring back our soils and we want to grow locally, if you're building a closed loop circular economy, then you have to start practicing sustainability. And the low carbon aspect of this, when you think about low carbon, all I'm saying is redirect our practices. Let's put that carbon back into the ground where it belongs with those microorganisms who live inside of us and they're in the ground. We are an ecosystem. I think that Detroit is in a situation or a position in the world to be a leader in this space. I know that it is, because there's no reason why we shouldn't be, but if I'm getting calls from people from all over the world about a simple model for me to do interviews on TV or magazines or whatever, getting called to speak at conferences all over the country about this, then that says something about Detroit, not about me. It says something about actually practicing this model and doing it in a city that's very unique. So the education and conservation, really quick. Bosch Corporation just recently issued a grant to the Detroit Dirt Foundation. I have a for-profit and a nonprofit, and the goal with the STEM project is to bring composting kits into classrooms for children. Nothing against you guys, but the kids are my favorite people to be around. I mean, their minds are, they absorb information, they're excited. This is a part of their life. So I'm like, if I'm going to help build a culture, let me start with the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, K through 12. And I'm speaking at Cranbrook next week. I Skype with high school students and middle school students all over the country. So my thing is, if we're going to build a culture around this, which goes back to that C, carbon, compost, culture, we have to let these young people, we have to get them these resources. So if I have to utilize the Detroit Public Schools to get young children to start composting and taking that home, then that's what I'll do. These young people, we have to put resources back into their hands, but also agriculture, it was no longer a priority in our society. Technology and all these other things came into play and we got disconnected. So we need to get back, aligned with agriculture and the practices of sustainability. That is the future. But furthermore, the children, they are the future, and they're the ones who in 60 years are going to be affected by this issue. So this is a rendering that Giffords Webster helped me create. It's important that we create models. They're not all going to look the same, but anaerobic digestion, it could be, you could have that outside the city on farms. The Detroit Zoological Society, they built one, and I think it was about 1.2 million, and it's more of a dry system, so you don't get that odor. They're not creating biofuels at the zoo, but the systems that actually create biofuels, sure, we can have them in rural areas, but I think that in-vessel technology and anaerobic digestion should be here in the city, because what we're gonna start witnessing is if we can divert all that food waste and utilize the yard waste, we can create energy, we can create compost, we can utilize that same system to heat the buildings that are on those grounds. We can say, hey, DTE, you want to help with the solar? Have that natural sunlight coming in. There are all of these different benefits, and that's really where I would like to see a model, be built here in this city where socially, economically, and environmentally we're going to impact communities, put tools back in the hands of young people. I think the revolution is with the young people and getting them these resources that they need and having them to understand, that we should be learning about waste management or recycling practices in the classroom. We should be having children understand how to grow their own food. We're in a crisis right now, and I know that most people, a lot of us are, we have a lot to think about on the day-to-day, but we're in a crisis in this world, point blank, period. All these natural disasters, everything that's happening around the world, we're in a crisis. Our oceans, not, here's my thing. I told somebody the other week, I said, when you see me, just imagine I have this big red X on me. And they were like, well, why? I said, because whenever I see you, I'm going to keep talking about these same things because we're in a crisis. When our oceans are dealing with contamination and erosion and eroded soils, and all of these things are affected by one another, and then the climate, when you look at climate and how that's impacted, I don't really understand what would be so hard about passing legislation. I mean, I do, because when I was in DC, I said, this isn't the place for me. Because the dollars allocated for environmental initiatives was none compared to oil, and that's a whole nother conversation. But the point is, if we continue to bury food waste, and we don't have to do that, we have the solutions. There are models that exist all around the world. So now it's time for us to move in that direction. And I believe with the right people in the community, the right support and collaboration, we can build a site here in this city that, will revolutionize this part of the world. I really do. And what you see is there's solar way up by the service drive. Then under that building, under the white building right there, I would like to have like the in-vessel technology in there, so we can basically mass produce compost. And then what you see under those blue kind of they look like awnings almost, is to create different ratios for the soil. Because you have to realize it takes about 500 to 1,000 years to develop 1 inch of soil. It takes 500 to about 1,000 years to develop 1 inch of soil. And we have food waste in the landfill that can go back into the ground. And if we put one layer of compost out in the world, the ongoing process begins, and we can bring those soils back within like a 10-year time frame. So if they've been eroding, those horizons have been eroding around the world, we have an opportunity to create compost, and we can solve a few issues. we can reduce those emissions or that carbon and redirect that, put that back into the ground, create the byproducts that can open up an opportunity for a market. We can build the systems, which will create jobs, redirect education. I'd like to stand up here and go on and on and on about all the things that can happen, but I really want everybody to think about this, because we have an opportunity to build the culture around this, and our city's just waiting for us to move in that direction. I think that, I know I've said a whole lot in a little bit of time, and I've tried to repeat myself a few times, so you could think about that food waste that's being buried and how we could use that and repurpose it and make something like compost. But if we can empower each other and start understanding that this has nothing to do with wealth, or whether you're in an impoverished community or wherever, we have to empower each other. And this is the one thing that I really think can happen together. It's going to take the world, everybody around the world. I mean, those Paris climate agreements, the UN, all the initiatives. I went to the White House a few times, and I'm going to tell you right now, all of those soil scientists, they should be our friends in our community. We really should be knocking on their doors and going, hey, what do you think we should be doing differently in our cities? You know, Jo Handelsman happens to be a hero of mine, and she's one of my advisors on the STEM project. And her focus since the 80s has been on the microbial community, you know, and those microorganisms, and how the health is even in the soil. They're finding, you know, that the antibiotics that are in the soils can contribute to our health. You know, so we're talking about, this is beyond, you know, an economic thing. This is spiritual. You know, all of that's in the ground, you know, but we have to take care of it. It's our responsibility. And if we're developing these pathways for the youth, then we got to start leading by example and getting them the things that they need. And I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but if you're looking at $218 billion going into the landfill, and that, you know, that amount of food waste, it could be recovered through food banks. It can go to the homeless shelters. I mean, we can talk about all of these different benefits. Was that I think it was, it's very hard for me to talk about these things in in 15 or 20 minutes or whatever, because I see a lot of people shaking their head and agreeing and whatnot. And because you guys, I know, if you're here at a Green Task Force meeting, then you are doing your part, or you're at least wondering how to collaborate or how to move forward. But all of us are contributing in our own way here at this particular meeting, because we're all here for a reason. But I'm very grateful for this opportunity to talk to you. I get invited to speak all over, and now I finally get to talk here at home. So I guess you can be a prophet in your own city, but but that's, you know, if anybody has any questions, I don't know, can I answer a few questions?
From the Sierra Club, and this is exciting. We have been talking about composting in the Green Task Force. It has, and Renee Wallace chairs the organics, and so she's on it as well. Very passionate about it, as are we. I'm with the water subcommittee, but our primary interest has been in stormwater management. And so I've been told, and I'd like to know your thoughts on it, that if we have better soil, and I kind of know this to be true, that we will also be able to manage our stormwater better. But I'm looking for specifics on, you had mentioned if you put just a layer of soil, of compost, of good soil on top of all the vacant land that we have, that within, I think you said 10 years, we would see a market improvement overall. Do you know what process is needed also to help us manage our stormwater better as it relates, because compost is going to manage it better than this hard clay that we have?
My thoughts are, if we can mass produce the compost and put it in these places where the issues are going on, right? So the riverfront, start doing a lot of testing and taking things to the lab. So if we can take some of the soil samples there, figure out what issues they're dealing with, and then create the compost applications based on that, and then get our local soil scientists involved with that, I think we'll be able to see that ongoing process, because compost, once those microorganisms start procreating and they start working properly as far as the nutrients, that actually does clean the water. When it filtrates through there, that's the way for the microorganisms to do their job. You know what I mean? But I think we have to set those processes up throughout the city and just test over a period of time, and keep adding the compost and going to the labs and allowing the people who understand what this is about to do it. I'm pretty sure Michigan State, U of M, and Wayne State, I know that they would love to come into the city to help with, that particular, that's, when you're talking about stormwater, that's something that should be top priority for any of the local universities. And I believe that if we get the soil scientists involved and have them test and, utilize the compost properly, I think it's a win-win situation. There are plenty of experts, and I'd be willing to help. I know that. And then in California, I know experts all around the country that I can, if you want to talk to some of them or get data or anything or information, I'd be happy to help with that.
I would love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Passion, if you could just quickly talk about the business model of how to keep this going and make it sustainable at this scale.
Okay, sure. We already know that how many jobs that we can create based off of the technology if we're able to purchase that. And I believe the model, what will make it sustainable is if we can kind of almost replace, not almost, replace the landfill, the food waste that's going to the landfill, and utilize certain models to mass produce the compost, you're going to create jobs with mass production of the compost. But also, I think where DTE and others could play a role is the energy, or that methane that's being created, or the biofuels for that matter. If a truck can use a biofuel to pick up that same food waste, you begin to, change that carbon, that footprint. So the model, it's sustaining all on its own if you're redirecting the so-called waste, which I think are resources, but if you're capturing that and you're repurposing the food waste and the herbivore manure, and you're helping the microbial community, that's an ongoing daily thing that we have to do for the rest of our lives forever. And so the model, I truly believe, we haven't even scratched the surface here in the city. I only worked with 2 corporations. And so we were able to get data just off of 2 corporations, and that wasn't all of their locations. That was right here downtown. Let's say you create 5 different variations, right, that you want to put on the market. The zoo wants to call it zoo poo. That's what they're going to call the Detroit dirt that we're doing together. The hydroponic shops will have a premium product. There'll be worm castings. So when you're putting this on the market, let's just say one product costs $25.99, the other one costs $40, the other one might cost $15. You already have the production on the retail side of what this is, okay? Because you can compare that to other products that are on the market right now. When you walk into a hydroponic shop or go to Home Depot or Meijer or wherever, they have soils and compost and worm castings already on the market. I'm just rooting for Michigan to get into this game more. And there's some people here in the state that are doing things like Dairy Do, and there are other zoos around the country that are doing the same thing, but that's part of the market of the model is the retail space. And you need people, the Goodwill, they're just waiting for me to get more contracts so they can put people to work. They're all in. But we have to expand and get a larger, piece of land, if you will, to build out the system. So that's part of it, is the retail. Then on the wholesale, if you're looking at urban farmers who are in the community, if they're not doing that on their own, then we should be helping to create compost with the urban farmers and giving them a deal, or giving them some of those resources, those leaves, that yard waste, that herbivore manure, so they can create compost as well. So you have an opportunity to create jobs based off of the retail and the wholesale. But when you start talking about the byproducts, it just depends on which system. Because the more elaborate the system is, when you're talking about anaerobic digestion, you're talking about making biofuels, you're talking about, energy, you have an effluent or a liquid fertilizer, you have the solids that are coming out of that system. So that particular model, you're getting all of these benefits. And then there's climate. If you can take that waste from going back into the landfill, then you're not going to contribute, to those GHGs. You're now redirecting the carbon and putting that back into the ground. So the local economy is industry building out the industry. That's sustainable, and that's helping to sustain us, but also the economy, so you have your byproducts and you have your industry. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, Peter Benz, Friends of the Detroit River. Where are you now in terms of, are you using anaerobic systems or just aerobic systems? What
Just
are you
aerobic.
Producing your,
Just aerobic. I am on a 2.5-acre site over there, Michigan and 22nd, and we have visited a few companies that actually make the in-vessel technology that I'm interested in. I'm interested in in-vessel, of mass producing compost. That's what I'm most interested in. But the zoo, their system is now running, and they've eliminated steps that I used to have to take manually, and they have an anaerobic digester at the zoo. And if you want to see it, I'm pretty sure if you made an appointment, they'd allow you to see their system. And it's been going for about a year. Michigan State helped them build that out. But the companies that actually build the in-vessel that I'm interested in, which are these, I should have put a picture up there, but there are these long, tubes that heat up to extreme temperatures,
Right.
and they turn all day long, and they produce the compost. So I'm just doing it. I've been doing it manually for the last 6-7 years.
okay, it's just a question, I was curious where you're at right now. You answered that.
Yeah, we're Michigan and 22nd, yep, a 2.5-acre site. And then the other property that we're looking at is about 7 acres, and we're raising money right now to bring in vessel technology. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In your conceptualizing or your modeling, have you thought about funding mechanism for a city like Detroit to make the transition in terms of picking up at people's curbside?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm not going to say that that's something that I'm going to do, but I think that the models that exist in San Francisco and Austin and Seattle and different places around the country, we can emulate that same infrastructure, because they have companies picking up curbside just like people pick up any other general waste or recycling. So I think that what my personal opinion is on this would be to start in a few neighborhoods and run a pilot and kind of take baby steps before we jump all in, and maybe get private funding. But Elizabeth and I were talking yesterday about, legislation. That's really the driver here. I mean, if the legislation is there, and we talked about tipping fees, if we can somehow take some of the tipping fees, or, get some of the waste companies to start redirecting and helping with the infrastructure. They already have the vehicles and, the manpower and the resources. I believe that it's something that we can do. I think we just have to create a pilot and take baby steps over the next few years and make it a citywide thing. But I think we start in certain neighborhoods, small, and then grow it. But the infrastructure, if we have designated sites for this, I think the city of Detroit and the county could do it. I really do. But as far as funding, I think we should get some of the private funding too, even though they're trying to figure out, what is it? What did we say yesterday? That the tipping fees were going to go up, and then they were looking to utilize some of that for grants and things of that nature.
Right,
yeah.
It's spread over a number of things, but one of them is materials management grants,
Yeah.
assuming everything goes through. And that's correct, and that could be used for a number of things, including this type of thing.
Right. And I think that some of the private companies would be willing to help with that too, at least to get the pilots off the ground. But the curbside, I think that it would be great if you started with maybe a few hundred homes and just got the data. And I don't think that would be as expensive as just doing like a citywide, composting. But I see it happening in San Francisco. SF Environment did a good job. It didn't happen overnight, but they're in a great place. But once again, legislation is going to drive that. I believe that legislation is where it is.
We are putting in rain gardens, residential rain gardens and others throughout the city to manage stormwater. One of the most expensive aspects of a rain garden is the cost for compost. And so it's just another opportunity to think about, is the compost that you make, the compost that the city makes, can be used to offset the cost of rain gardens and help us to have a truly green city and have green infrastructure in many, many places, perhaps more than we would expect, because the cost of those gardens and the bioswales will come down.
I'm open to that because, we want to take the first site and build that out and help, others in the community, so we can open up the door or at least create the opportunity for multiple sites to be utilized. Because I think in all corridors of the city, north, south, east, west, there should be a site there for yard waste, for composting, and to get it back out in the community. I'm with you, because we have to mass produce this. We have to constantly, and that's what's going to sustain our ground, our water, the foundation. That's what's going to keep it going. And as long as the pricing is competitive, I mean, we've already worked out, we have a business plan right now on how much it is to package, how many employees based off of volumes, how much the equipment would actually, the inputs and outputs of the actual compost itself. So we've been working on this for years. And so I'd be happy. That's why I think there's wholesale, there's retail, and you just create it accordingly to the need of what we need as far as residents or businesses and whomever. Because the breweries and like the coffee shops, a lot of them are all in. A lot of restaurants say, hey, when you expand, we would love to be involved, because we know that you're going to manage this the way that it needs to be managed. Number one, we know where it's going, and we could be the same. I've been promoting this with General Motors and others. Be the same customer that's helping to actually redirect the waste or help us create contracts, can buy it back for landscaping, for Department of Transportation, the rain gardens. Yeah, I think it's an ongoing a system that is infinite, and we have the opportunity here to do that.
Passion, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know we have some more questions, but we are now at 4:15, so we want to respect everybody's time and try to get us all out of here by 4:30. And so now, if we could, let's do our updates for our subcommittees.
Good afternoon again. Khalil Lagan with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. I am the co-chair for the Water Subcommittee. I have a few updates to share. First of all, the subcommittee meets on the third Tuesday monthly. Our next meeting will take place next Tuesday from 1 to 3 p.m. at the block at Cass Park. And we will be going over the Detroit Water Agenda, which was created and published in 2012. What we're doing is a 5-year progress report to understand the progress the city has made in achieving sustainability in water. And so far, we've made really good progress through that. We are going topic by topic. And essentially what we are looking for input from our committee members is to understand where that progress has happened across the city. And we learned some really great things here today that will help us. One of our components is commercial agriculture and the role that water plays in that. So we'll be looking for that feedback from those who participate in that meeting. We also have a really wonderful contest that we'll be promoting this spring for students in grades 6 through 8. It is a green infrastructure poster contest where those students will be invited to tell us what water means to them. And we will have a panel of judges and a celebratory event We're inviting the committee members and those that are members of the Green Task Force to also bring us the students that might be interested in participating. The winners that are selected, their winning drawings will be posted around the city at billboards. We've had some very generous sponsors step up locally. We're really excited about that. They'll also have an opportunity to see their artwork displayed at bus stops because we've identified bus stops as a place where we can begin to manage stormwater, and that space can also serve as an educational point just because of the volume of patrons that are using those spaces. And lastly, I think that is it for us. So again, our next meeting will be next Tuesday at 1 p.m. at the block at Cass Park. If you're interested in attending, please do so. If you have any questions, you can contact myself or Ms. Irma Leapart.
Would this be with all Detroit public schools or just certain schools?
It is grades 6 through 8. We are focusing on Detroit Public Schools District, but it is open to grades 6 through 8. Is that correct, Tony? Yes. Okay. DPS, grades 6 through 8. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Hi, I'm Natalie. So I am from the Recycling and Waste Reduction Subcommittee. At our last meeting, we spent a good amount of time talking about new development and multifamily housing and waste policies involved with that. So looking at storage and collection of recyclables, construction and demolition waste management planning, and construction and demolition waste management. Trying to discuss incentives for developers because we don't have anything like that, so incentives for implementation of these infrastructures for new developments to provide space for collection of recycling and composting in the future or in the buildings that they have currently. From the county, we received an update that there are 3 household hazardous waste days set for the year, June 9th, August 11th, and November 3rd, and they are now collecting televisions. And the curbside recycling update for the city, we are currently, as of December, at 23.27%. So that's 48,401 single-family homes and units up to 4 who are recycling in the curbside recycling program. We have a text messaging service, and we have over 3,000 subscribers who are currently using that. We also spent some time talking about tonnage that's being collected. We are now at 155 pounds per participating household. So we are way below where we should be, so we're working on looking at that and how we can possibly get carts at everyone's home throughout the city. And our next meeting, we meet the 4th Monday of every month. We'll be meeting on February 26th at 2 p.m., and we meet at 5800 Russell Street. That's the DPW yard. So, June 9th, and that's in Dearborn, August 11th, in Westland, and November 3rd in Taylor, and they're looking at a 4th date.
Hello, Tony Henry with the Renewable Energy Subcommittee. We generally meet on the 2nd Thursday of the month at 71 Garfield. This past meeting, we had Dan Worth from Traverse City speak with the group about the challenges, the positive outcomes that they have had in Traverse City as becoming a 100% renewable city. And also we are in the process of planning a sustainability conference, particularly around the Parker Village project. And as an update from the committee, we have 3.3 megawatts of solar currently installed. I wanted to share that with council.
So what is a good translation for 1 megawatt? What does that actually mean? What can a megawatt power? Is that 4,500 homes? Is it?
3.3 megawatts. Just to give you a perspective, one of the projects that we currently have has 20 kilowatts on a 30-unit residential building. I don't have an exact number of panels for you, as the size and the capacity of the panels all differ. You can find more information on this on Detroit Green Map, has many of the projects listed and identified by location, and you can find greater information as to who installed them, when they were installed, and that will answer your question much more thoroughly.
And so a megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Renee Wallace from the Composting Subcommittee or Organic Recycling Subcommittee. She is out of town today, but I think her meeting will be March the 1st, if I'm not mistaken. Right, and it's here in this building. So March the 1st, and it's usually 10 a.m. 10 a.m. March the 1st. So a lot of things that Passion talked about, that's what they'll be talking about, that subcommittee as well. April 21st is our celebration. We're having an Earth Day celebration. It will be our second annual. GFL is our sponsor this year, as last year.
All right.
So thank you. And so we need everyone's participation to help us out. We're giving awards. So for the different subcommittees, if you have some people in mind that you wanted to give awards to for outstanding work, please let us know. We're going to have a breakfast. This year, it's going to be at the IEBW Hall. That's the Electrical Union. That is a sustainable building, net zero from my understanding. So we're going to go there this year. So we're having a walkthrough tomorrow. So just to check everything out, make sure it's up to our standards, and I believe it is, from 10 to 12, okay? So please mark that down, and we want everyone to attend. You get more information every week. I'm going to tell it every meeting. I'm going to talk about it, so we can have a very successful celebration like we did last year. All right.
Mr. Benz.
Yeah, again, Peter Benz for the Friends of the Detroit River. We want to thank all of the people who exhibited and were part of the Shiver on the River, and we're taking applications for next year, for February 2019, for our 19th annual Ecology Family Fun Fair at Belle Isle. But between now and then, in April, the beginning of April, we will be having a cleanup on the Detroit River, and as far as I know, it's the only one around where you can get on a boat and go out to the islands and actually do cleanup and a boat ride at the same time. The other thing that's coming up, and we are looking for people who might want to be volunteers or presenters for our annual Water Fest on Belle Isle on the 25th of October, and that's a teach-in for our young people in the Detroit schools, and it's a great work that we do with the Detroit school system. And like I say, for all those events, all they have to do is call and contact the Friends of Detroit River. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Benz. Well, without anything else to take up today, this meeting will be adjourned. Thank you all for coming today.